a devoted fan, and a plugged-in reporter. There is no better way to talk about hoops than that. Mia O'Brien and Mitch Northam have you covered for the W, the NCAA, Unrivaled, and anything else that involves a ball and a backboard. This is the Women's Basketball Podcast.
Welcome into this week's The Women's Basketball Podcast. It is Feast Week across the world of college hoops, and we are so excited to break it down with you. That includes you, Baller TV, Mia O'Brien, Mitch Northam. Get it out of the way now, Mitch. Flow Sports, Baller TV, they make a comeback this week, but it is a good thing because we have so much basketball to watch?
It's not. No.
Okay.
I'm not embracing FloHoops or Baller TV. I'm not giving them any compliments. They have a bad service that is very expensive and I think is a detriment to the growth of women's college basketball. And I think it's a shame that some very good games are on those services this week. Kentucky versus Maryland. I won't be watching because I'm not paying for that. I'll listen to the radio, Kentucky or Maryland, whichever radio broadcast is better. We'll have to find out. TCU Richmond also on there. There's a couple others. So I do want to compliment and commend the Players Era Tournament.
Mm-hmm. We are going to talk about all the different MCs, but continue.
They have a deal with Turner. They're going to be on True TV, and you can watch those games on HBO Max as well. So, you got the streaming option, you got the cable option. I'm sure they're going to have a great broadcasting team, color commentator, play-by-play person calling those games. That'll be great. But yeah, I will just reiterate what I said last year, which I retweeted today, my rant about FloHoops and Baller TV. Coaches, you have power here. You can tell these MTEs, we're not playing in your event unless you have a legitimate broadcast partner. And there are so many options in 2025 of people who do a good job and want to broadcast women's college basketball on basic cable or other streaming services that are actually good and decent. How about the CW? How about Ion? How about True TV? How about Amazon Prime? How about Peacock? There's a lot of options out there. So you go to these people, you go to your MTE and you tell them legitimate streaming option, get it together. We need recruits to be able to watch us, and we need fans to be able to watch us at a reasonable price and at a level that is accessible. That's my rant.
And somehow, some way, folks, that is not this week's beef. We will get to this week's beef. We must first begin with this week's starting five, the 5 games from the last week. We need to talk about contractually. I will also mention that maybe ESPN Plus is an easy way for some of those MTEs to broadcast their games. Just throw it on out there.
ESPN Plus, great.
Just wanted to plug the employer while we can. Yeah, exactly. Let's get to this week's starting 5, Mitch, because before we do look ahead to a week of Thanksgiving holiday celebration as well as multi-team events, we first look back at a week that featured many top 25 bouts that have reshaped how we will look at the college basketball landscape here as the month of November wraps up. We begin with USC Notre Dame, number one in this week's starting 5. I texted you as this game was going on. Final score, by the way, the home team, the Fighting Irish 61, the Trojans 59. I said, Mitch, are we going to have to delete some tweets? Are we going to have to issue an apology on the pod? To which you said,
no, we will not. We will not be doing any of that. We will give credit where credit is due, and we will say that sometimes Hannah Hidalgo will be enough. I think sometimes when that is acceptable is when Notre Dame doesn't get into shootouts and track meets, and when they can play defense at an elite level. And I mean team defense, not just Hannah Hidalgo getting 10 steals. That, I think, is what we saw against USC. It is certainly not what we saw against Michigan, where they lost by 39 points. But against USC, they turned the Trojans over 21 times. That is big time for them. They also got 22 points from Hannah Hidalgo, and they got some really crucial plays. Cassandra Prosper at the end there, tipping the inbounds pass away and kind of disrupting USC's potential game-winning play. I think USC is still a team that is figuring its way out. I wrote, after they beat NC State, they're trying to work to sort of redefine themselves this season with Juju Watkins, on the sidelines. And some of that is, I think, just trying to figure out like who is the, just to return to an old Joe Giglio axiom, who is the bus driver for the USC Trojans. Like against NC State, we had one in the first half. It was London Jones. In the second half, it was Jazzy Davidson. This game, we had Jazzy doing some really good stuff, but she also had 8 turnovers, which is not good. But she is a freshman. She's going to have games like that. But then
she also did have a look, Mitch, at what would have been the game-winning bucket. And that's a shot that as she missed that layup, I said to Kevin on the couch, I said, that's a shot that I don't think she misses next year. I don't think she misses her junior year. I don't think she misses her senior year. But this is the type of growing pain that when a freshman, an 18-year-old is your bus driver, if you're Lindsay Gottlieb, you're going to have to live with these highs and lows. Well,
kind of akin to there was a game last season where Sarah Strong had an opportunity at a game-winning basket and missed it. And now we see the player that Sarah Strong is now, who we'll get to that later. But this is a great win for Notre Dame. It is also, we will get to this later, a great win in a terrible week for the ACC.
This may be the banner week. Like this is what they're going to hang the banner of. We beat USC as an ACC conference. Notre Dame.
It might be the ACC's best win of the season so far through 3 weeks.
Which we do think, and this is the thing, like I was skeptical of even making USC a top 10 outfit to begin the season. You were not. You knew with Jazzy Davidson that there was a chance this was a top 10 team throughout the course of the season. I think that ultimately you're going to have to ride those highs and lows just because you don't have Juju Watkins and because this is a new look without, you don't have Kike Iriafen as well. So this is a Rhea Marshall. This is a new look front court as well. And so I do think it'll be up and down and every way in between for Lindsay Gottlieb and company. I do want to note, because it is a great bit on this program, this idea of Cassandra Prosper, who, as the ESPN Plus production on Hannah Hidalgo so eloquently put it, is the one friend that Hannah Hidalgo, her best friend at Notre Dame, who she goes to church with, and is the one player who did not transfer from last year's team or graduate. And the fact that she has the game-winning play, everything went Hannah Hidalgo's way. And I'm not sure it will every week. And that's not to say I don't want to watch Hannah Hidalgo be an All-American, because I do. I just think, and we've talked about this, I'm sorry, Notre Dame. Congrats on the win. I don't know if the roster construction holds up long term. I do want to give a shout out to Vanessa DeJesus, who I thought played out of her mind in this game. And, 11 points or 13 points, excuse me. KK Bransford also had a nice day with 11 points and 8 boards. But I thought Vanessa DeJesus had some really well-timed, not just points, but I thought the 4 assists came at really critical moments. And I think if you do have someone in the backcourt that can complement, or on the wing who can complement Hidalgo, that's always been the question. As I don't know. I mean, you tell me, like, what role does Cassandra Prosper play? Like, I know they're kind of positionless because Hannah can honestly probably guard 1 through 4.
Yeah, they don't really have like a true center.
No. She's probably that.
Cassandra Prosper and KK's Bransford are kind of like your 2 forwards who were kind of stationed in the front court. I think this is, this game is kind of the blueprint for success for Notre Dame this year. Like, if you hold the opposing team under 60 and you get 20 or so from Hannah Hidalgo, you're probably in good shape. If you get into a situation where they are just lighting your defense up, like we saw with Michigan, that's a bad design, because I don't think they have the offensive firepower, whereas they did last year, to play teams in the 70s, 80s, 90s. I think that is a recipe for disaster for Notre Dame. So if you can get that defense to lock down, if you get whatever you get from Hannah Hidalgo every night, you're probably in good shape.
16 steals, and when only 5 of them come from Hidalgo, and that means that 11 had to come from somewhere else. A recipe for success for the Fighting Irish. Let's get to number 2 in this week's starting 5. A little ACC flair here as well. Also a team that will be featured on Baller TV, FloHoops coming up this week in the Kentucky Wildcats. What did we see from Kenny Brooks and friends in the Bluegrass State Showdown?
The Kentucky Wildcats went into Louisville and they won by double digits, 72-62. I think I voted Kentucky. I think I was someone pointed out on Twitter, I had them highest among all AP voters this week. I had them at 5th. I think that this starting
You're very high on their front court, though. And I will tell you, as we were watching that game, I said to Kevin, I was like, man, like they do look like the Monstars out there.
Everybody is just so long. Everybody's so long. Like when you have, 6'7" Clara Strack in the middle, and then you have Amelia Hassett, who I think is 6'4", and Tiani Key, who is 6'4", and you have all three of them on the court at the same time. Like, it's just, Kenny Brooks talked about this when I talked to him after their win at Marshall. Actually, I believe it was Marshall's head coach who said this. Just the fact that it's very disruptive, like trying to play offense against all these outstretched arms that can really disrupt and cut off passing lanes and stuff like that. Not to mention block shots. In this one, they had 8 blocks against Kentucky. They had 5 steals. Louisville as a whole only had 6 turnovers, but I think, it's evident in sort of the disruptiveness to Louisville's offense. But yeah, 72-62. Kenny Brooks, by the way, has a 5-game winning streak now against Jeff Walls and Kentucky and Louisville. A streak that includes the 2023 ACC championship.
And a game in the NCAA tournament too, right?
I don't think
Iowa played Louisville, so no.
Yeah, I don't think NCAA tournament, but they beat Louisville for that ACC title when he was at Virginia Tech before they went on to the Final Four. I think Kentucky's starting 5 is elite. When you talk about Toni Morgan and the progress that she has made in a short amount of time, like when she was at Georgia Tech, we always thought of her as this really solid and good combo scoring guard. At Kentucky, her passing has really improved, and Kenny Brooks hasn't asked her to be Georgia Amore. Instead, he's put her in a position to hey, we're kind of bringing you along and integrating you into the system. Just pick your spots. And, again, another game where she has 7 assists. I think she's amongst the nation's leaders in assists per game this season. Let's see, pulling up her hoop stats. Yes, she's number 1. She is averaging 8.9 assists per game, which when you have Clara Strack, Amelia Hassett, Tiani Key down there, in the post, it's going to make passing a little bit easier, throw some of those balls into the post.
Larger radius to catch the ball, potentially.
Yeah. I have some concerns about Kentucky's depth. I hope that they stay healthy this season, but that starting 5, Jordan Obi rounding that starting 5 out, transfer from Penn, who missed all last season with an injury. She's really good as well, and a compliment to Toni Morgan there in the backcourt. It's a really, really good starting 5, and I think that their size and length are going to continue to give people problems this season.
So what's the problem then for Jeff Walls' Cardinals? And again, it should be noted for those of you who may be new to women's basketball, Jeff Walls, pretty accomplished on the national team scene as well, not just as the head coach of Louisville. And so to that I say, Mitch, is there trouble out there in Eastern Kentucky or Western Kentucky, excuse me? Or is it just the matter of all the parts haven't come together yet?
I wouldn't sound the alarm on Louisville yet. I think Kentucky is just 10 points better than them. I think they're just a better team. I think Laura Ziegler and Taj Roberts are a really, really solid 1-2 punch that is going to win them a lot of games in the ACC. I do have some concerns about just all right, well, if those two aren't on, what do you have beyond that? Who is picking things up and kind of carrying things? We haven't really seen McKinley Randolph, I think, take the leap or be the player that a lot of people expected her to be right away. I think the same is maybe true for Amari Berry. So Louisville just needs a little bit more, I think, than what they're getting from the rest of their roster right now outside of Laura Ziegler and Taj Roberts.
Well, especially because a lot of those players are returning too. It's not like they've transferred into this program and are new.
Right.
That's where I think you want to see that year-over-year development.
And Jeff Walls, by the way, said after this game I think this was from over at Kentucky Sports Radio had the quote. Basically, like they went after Toni Morgan in the portal and didn't get her. And, Jeff Walz, to his chagrin now, had to take an L to her. So I think he mentioned something like it was the first time she has beaten Louisville because, they used to beat her at Georgia Tech all the time.
Yeah, okay.
So, so there's that.
With all due respect to Nell Fortner, Jeff Walz, I think you need to regard yourself as a little bit on a higher echelon of the ACC. But then again, the whole ACC is down. So what do I know? By the way, calling JU games this weekend, Special Jennings, the head coach of JU, straight up said Rima Collins, the Ole Miss transfer who ended up at FIU, she was like, oh, yeah, we went after her. She has not played her best basketball. She's really good. She's going to have a double-double today. She did. JU wins the game. But to that point, I think that's going to become a common refrain for coaches. Like, oh, yeah, we tried to get her in the portal. Like, oh, yeah, we were after. Like, I'm glad everyone's just out here saying it. So,
here's the quote. Toni Morgan's got to be excited. This is her first win over Louisville. I love the way she competes, the way she fights. When she went in the portal, we called about her too. End quote.
Thank you, Jeff. Thank you, Jeff.
Go ahead.
One
more quote from Jeff Walz, which I think kind of sums up the point I was making. Our lack of fight is a concern. It comes to a point. Just foul the bleep out of somebody. It takes all 5 on the floor. So Louisville maybe needs some added toughness there.
Something tells me this is not the last time we will hear from Louisville in this podcast, because we are going to evaluate the state of the Atlantic Coast Conference a little bit later in the program. Number 3 in this week's starting 5, though, as we look back at the week that was, what a night for hoops on Friday night. The ESPN crew couldn't have asked for much more. You go from that USC Notre Dame diaper dandy marquee showdown to UConn, Michigan, the number 1 team in the land, against the then number 6 team in the land. And Mitch, this was one that, yes, we knew. Sarah Strong, AZ Fudd, the Fab 3 for Michigan, the sensational sophomores, but at the same time, probably going to be fighting a little bit above their weight class. And at halftime, it largely looks like that. At halftime, this was a 55-27 lead for the Connecticut Huskies. And then what happened? Silas Swords is what happened. A video game like stat line in 40 minutes, the sophomore with 29 points, 9 boards, 3 assists. He has 5 turnovers. But she just did a little bit of everything. Timely scores when they needed it most, can create her own shot, can shoot the 3 ball as well, had 8 3-pointers in this game, folks. I always thought that Olivia Olson was the bus driver of this team. Maybe I'm misspoken. Perhaps it is Silas Swords all along. Olivia Olson, by the way, also scored in double figures, had a double-double, 18 and 10. But this is a team that then pushed UConn to the brink, 72-69. So many I saw online, just like myself, were falling asleep on their couch, woke up and said, oh my God, what is happening? How is Michigan clawing their way back into this? And so I say to you, Mitch, was the story of the game Michigan pushing UConn to the brink, or UConn allowing the Wolverines back into this game in the second half?
I think it was Michigan. I think this game overall, I think it was both good for Michigan and UConn, and I'll kind of square that here. For Michigan, like, I think this was proof of concept of, like, this team is legit. This team is probably going to challenge for the Big Ten title. By the way, while we're about to dive deep into the woes for the ACC, the Big Ten looks great this season. Yeah. UCLA, Michigan, I know USC just took a loss, but like they're going to be a team to be reckoned with down the stretch. Maryland playing well, and Iowa, a big weekend for them, and Michigan State also playing well. Like, this conference is deep. This conference has some hitters in it, and I think Michigan is a team that might be able to kind of challenge UCLA for the Big Ten crown. I love how Silas Swords just like decides, I'm playing a top 10 opponent on national TV. I'm going to turn it on, like we saw last year when they played against South Carolina and pushed South Carolina to the brink in the season opener. She's really, really good and super talented, and Olivia Olson, right there with her. I think the two of them are going to carry this team to some real heights this year. For UConn, I thought the positive was, I put UConn finally this week as number 1 in my AP ballot, above South Carolina and UCLA, because now I think that UConn has the most impressive win, I think, over Michigan. When you compare the resumes, to theirs, to UCLA and South Carolina, I think in this game we had the question answered. I think we were all kind of curious. All right, who is going to step up and step into the shoes of Paige Beckers for UConn when these games get tight? And the answer is both Sarah Strong and AZ Fudd. AZ Fudd, 31 points, went shot for shot with Silas Swords at some points. Starts the fourth quarter with 3 straight three-pointers, hits those big free throws down the stretch to win the game. But then on the other side of that, on the defensive end, you have Sarah Strong grabbing 20 rebounds, 16 of them on the defensive end. Plus she had 4 blocks, plus she had 3 steals, plus she had 6 assists, plus she had 16 points. I think they are the best duo in the country. And I think that as long as they're healthy and playing well, like this is the best team in the country. I would like to see a little bit more out of some of their other complementary pieces, specifically Sarah Williams, who they went out and got from Wisconsin. I kind of think that maybe Sarah Williams was a good stats, bad team player at Wisconsin, and maybe we're kind of seeing some of that now that she's at UConn. I would like to see a little bit more. Kaylee Heckel, I would like to see more from her, the transfer from USC, and some others there. KK Arnold had a big shot, I think, in the fourth quarter. She also had 7 assists. So even having said that, like when you have AZ Fudd and Sarah Strong, you're going to win a lot of games. Like both of them are going to be, I think Sarah Strong is probably a lock. I think AZ Fudd is going to be also contending for a spot on the first team All-American list this year. So, I think really good signs for both of those teams out of this game. I would love to see a rematch in March. Let's see it.
And as of this writing, AZ Fudd is now the odds-on favorite, according to some sports books. Some others have someone else, but according to some sports books, now with the Dallas Wings armed with their their second straight number 1 overall pick, AZ Fudd, the odds-on favorite, according to some, to go number 1 overall in the WNBA draft. Yes, I've seen it on a couple different sports books.
I would be very surprised if she goes number 1 overall, just because of Awa Pham exists and Lauren Betts also exists.
Right. And the Earth Theory, Awa Fanning and Lauren Betts are both 6'7" plus. And there aren't many of those walking around the planet right now.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah. So, but I think it's honestly just the sports books, the casual observers of women's basketball saying, oh, of course they're going to take Paige's, bud. Yeah, duh. Like, that's how it goes. Which, fine, whatever. It would be really cool, though, if Sarah Strong is, the national player of the year, but AZ Fudd goes number 1 overall. Good little storyline brewing.
I think Kurt Miller and Jose Fernandez think a little bit bigger than let's just take.
Let's make Paige happy.
Right.
We will have a good story on that front a little bit later in the pod regarding the WNBA draft lottery, which was on Sunday. Rebecca Lobo, a part of that broadcast. Honestly, if I'm Rebecca Lobo, I'm so happy I called the Notre Dame game, because then she got to watch Sarah Strong with those 20 boards, and deep in her heart, Rebecca Lobo just so proud of what a fellow Husky was. That's who I think. I see 18 and 20, and I'm like, oh my God, is Rebecca Lobo back in college? Like, this is awesome. So I'm here for it. Let's get to number 4 in this week's starting 5. The one game that you attended this week, Mitch, after a gauntlet last program in which you had attended 3 games in 3 days, just one this week. And who did you check out?
Yeah. So during the week, I stayed at home and hung out with the fam, which was great. And then on Sunday, we were recording this on Monday, so this was yesterday, I drove up to Richmond, went to the Robins Center, where it was Taylor Swift Day, by the way. So just Taylor Swift.
We had that music at UNF last year. It's really cool. I love Taylor Swift Day.
All throughout the game. They had like 2,500 people there. It was a pretty good crowd for Richmond, which was awesome. It was loud in there. This was Richmond versus Navy. Richmond eventually pulled away to win 69-56 in the second or in the fourth quarter. But Navy had a lead in the third quarter and made this a really competitive game, throughout. And I was able to talk with both Aaron Roussel and Tim Taylor after the game, coach of the Spiders and the midshipmen. And just I thought this was just a great atmosphere and really great game between 2 mid-major teams that I think we are both going to see play in the NCAA tournament this year. My kind of takeaways from Richmond were, they were able to get this done when Maggie Dugan was maybe not at her best. Now, she did finish with 17 points, 14 rebounds, and 4 assists, But in the first half, she had 2 points and was shooting like 1 of 8 from the floor. And Navy was really being disruptive, with her and limiting her. And Navy's defense was really, really solid. And this was a game that Navy was in, throughout, when they didn't get their best game from their leading scorer, Zanai Barnett-Gay, who had just 11 points, but was really, really good on the defensive end. And, I was talking with Tim Taylor, Navy's head coach, and he was like, this is the best team that we're going to play this season, which I think is a big deal because Navy just played Florida and beat them. And you're saying that Richmond is better than a team from the SEC.
Don't let the Gators hear that. Oh, my God.
But it's true. He's right. It's true.
Liv McGill's not playing. Have fun.
Yeah. Richmond, they're going to continue to be tested here in non-conference play. I thought this was a good test for them. Like, they were able to figure some things out. Navy was able to expose some things, and that's what Aaron Roussel talked about. Like, one of the reasons he wanted to schedule this game was, not only to get a home game in the midst of all this, but he knew Navy was going to be good this year. And, Aaron Roussel spent a lot of time in the Patriot League. Him and Tim Taylor know each other pretty well. And saw the way Navy finished last season and was like, that's going to be a good game for us. And they were able to kind of highlight some holes and help Richmond kind of figure things out. Richmond is going to play TCU. They're going to play Green Bay, another good mid-major team. Mm-hmm. Fairfield, another good mid-major team. And then they're going to play the Product in Penn State later in December. And Navy, I think they're about to have, some get right games coming up. They got Manhattan and Duquesne in the MTE that they host every year in Annapolis. Those games are on ESPN Plus, by the way. And then later in December, their kind of big test right before Patriot League really starts in earnest is a game at South Florida. Which will be a good game for the Mids and the Bulls. I really liked what I saw out of both of these teams. And it was a really good and competitive mid-major game. And I think both of these teams are going to be playing in March.
And the Spiders will be playing in the Cancun Challenge. We will include that in your Feast Week preview a little bit later here on today's show. One more game to hit in this week's starting five. Come on. Mitch already gave him some love. I have to. Final score in the first game of the WBCA showcase at the Wide World of Sports Complex in Walt Disney World. Iowa 57, Baylor 52. That was then number 19, now number 11, Iowa, and then number 7, Baylor 52. For me, selfishly, Mitch, yes, there's the Iowa connection, but Talia Scott being a walking bucket, as she once proclaimed she was here in Northeast Florida, it was the fulfillment of a prophecy of sorts, knowing she's been banged up on inconsistent teams in Arkansas and Alabama each of the last 2 years. Talia goes for 32 points in 36 minutes. She was 6 of 16 from three-point land. Timely buckets at that. Goes shot for shot with the Hawks, who, of course, just quite frankly, have more weapons than Baylor has at this point in time. That's no knock on the Bears roster. It's just the reality of many wondered if this young team would be ready to compete this year or if it would take 1 year of seasoning with Addie Deal and that heralded recruiting class, even with one more coming next year. And McKenna, I'm going to be butchering her name, even though her dad put out the pronunciation online. Wazuko, however you pronounce it. McKenna W. McKenna W will be here to save us all next year. But point being, Iowa doesn't need saving because Hannah Stolke is playing her natural position at the 4. Ava Hayden, Jan Jensen did it again. Mitch. And they win 57-52. They also take down Miami in the championship game of this showcase, 64-61. So two great 1-2 possession victories for the Hawks. Mm-hmm. This one against the Baylor Bears, though, was so back and forth. And so it was really encouraging to see in a game in which it was ugly in the first half, Iowa 25 and Baylor with 27 points. It was not exactly your ideal offensive showing for either side. But the fact that then in the second half, the scoring just took off at such a euphoric pace and both these teams went shot for shot is really encouraging, knowing the landscapes of the Big 12 and the Big 10. Ava Hayden, by the way, finishes in this game with 18 points and 11 boards. And she kept it up. She was the MVP of the tournament, only a sophomore. Taylor Stremlow does come on with Chit Chat Right going down. I don't know if they actually openly admitted it's a concussion. I assumed it was a concussion because she kept grabbing her head.
They said she's day to day, I believe.
Yeah. She was still she was in, as intros were going on for the Miami game on Saturday, she was in the player tunnel, like welcoming the players to the floor. So she was there, like she was in street clothes, but she was with the team, which is really encouraging because she did have to be evaluated after this game, after the game against Baylor when she did go down. That really left Iowa without a true point guard per se. A lot of chatter about Taylor McCabe, who of course has been a catch and shoot specialist since she arrived in Iowa City. And now she can make layups and everyone wants to make jokes about, oh my God, this was her first 2-point made in 300 some odd shot attempts or whatever the stat was. No, Taylor McCabe was always going to have to take the next step in this offense. Ditto to Taylor Stremlow, who I thought had a pretty darn good rookie campaign, the lowest rated of a pretty good recruiting class in 2024. She, I don't want to say loses her role with Chit Chat Wright coming up from Georgia Tech via transfer, but she becomes the sixth woman that she was a year ago, right back to where she was. I thought she looked awesome when she had to step in for Chit Chat, both in this game in the second half and then against the Canes on Saturday. And she finished in this first game with 12 points and 4 assists. And Iowa just looks like they reloaded. We'll see what happens, though, in a loaded Big Ten.
Yeah, just 3 quick things on Iowa from the weekend. Number one, they were the biggest mover in the AP Top 25 poll that came out today, moved up 8 spots, which is pretty impressive and I think deserved after beating Baylor and Miami. Second, Ava Hayden, where did she come from?
She's been here. She had been there. I mean, last year, this is what Jan Jensen does, whether it's Megan Gustafson, Hannah, I'm blanking on her last name, who was Megan's classmate. No, not Stolke. No, Stolke. Not Amanda Olinger. She was also the year.
I know who you're talking about. I see her.
Why am I blanking on her name? You know who I'm talking about. I had to yell. Yes, that was when I was covering the team. I had to yell at Lisa Bluter and Jan and was like, why can't you put both of them on the floor? Have one of them, have Hannah play the 4. Megan can play the 5. They're 2 of your best 5. You should probably put them on the floor together. And ultimately they did. And it resulted in an Elite 8 run. Of course, the reason that you did not see much Ava Hayden last year is that she was playing second fiddle to Addie O'Grady, the Ally tip-off revelation, Mitch, from a season ago. Drew the ire of Caitlin Clark during Clark's tenure in Iowa City on more than one occasion. She played the 5. And at times they would slide Stolke to the 5, and then Hayden would come in relief. But they have put her in the Jan Jensen little incubator, and much like Megan Gustafson before her, much like Monica Zanano before her, not so much Addie O'Grady, she has popped out. Yes, shout out to Monica. Much like those 2 players. I mean, we could go back to Bethany Doolittle as well. She has popped out, ready-made, doesn't dribble the ball, catches, makes a post move, lays it up and in, the touch around the rim. It's so beautiful. It warms my heart that even now as the head coach of the Iowa Hawkeyes, Jan Jensen is still the post whisperer.
Yeah, I think it's funny. ESPN's website has 6'4" Ava Hayden listed as a guard. I don't think that's accurate. She is from Sherwood, Oregon, which is a place I'm not familiar with. Ava Hayden, apologies, I was not familiar with your game. But she was awesome this weekend. You mentioned her game against Baylor, also had 20 points, 6 rebounds, 2 steals in that win over Miami. I'm pretty sure she's going to be one of our USBWA players of the week, which is an awesome honor for her. Iowa moving up 8 spots in the AP Top 25 poll. I also just thought, against that game against Baylor, interesting, like the Iowa kind of let Talia Scott just do her thing and then basically dared the rest of the team to beat them, which they could not. Dariana Little-Page Bugs, all Big 12 talent, 0 points in 32 minutes. Bella Fauntleroy, 4 points in 29 minutes. They combined for 1 of 15 shooting. So, that's the recipe for success for Iowa in that game. I think this Iowa team is really good. As stated before, I think the Big Ten is really deep.
Iowa's upcoming schedule, they will play Western Illinois later after the Thanksgiving holiday, or I should say right before Thanksgiving, the 26th. Then they've got Fairfield and Rutgers traveling to Piscataway before December 10th, the showdown with Audi Crooks and the Iowa State Cyclones at Hilton Coliseum.
That's going to be a lot of fun.
It's going to be a lot of fun, but here's the thing, Mitch. So Iowa's 6-0. Iowa State is 7-0 as of the recording of this podcast. The Cyclones will face Marquette this weekend. Then they will face Northern Illinois on December 7th, and then they host Iowa. Up to this point, Iowa State has faced the likes of Southern, Valpo, Sacred Heart, Norfolk State, Drake, who's having a down year, although maybe that'll change come Valley time, and Mercyhurst. And so that's where, I don't know, like it's going to be either Iowa, maybe like, playing such significant competition in the non-con catches up to them, or Iowa State is actually going to have to play a big dog for the first time this season.
Yeah. Iowa State ain't played nobody yet. Even though
same with the men's team, by the way. I'm not trying to drag Jamie Pollard, the athletic director, but like both the men's and the women's teams, so hard to evaluate as an AP poll voter because you're like, they're good. Like Audi Crooks, we've said, throw a little sprinkle out there, National Player of the Year. But also they haven't played anybody. And same with the men's team. Like I forgot to put them in my men's poll 2 weeks ago.
Do better with scheduling.
Yeah, just like, I don't know, try to entertain me. Like, please, I'm begging you. That is this week's starting five, our 5 best games of the week that was. Before we look ahead to the week that is Feast Week, it's time to ask, what's the beef?
Pure beef.
Whoa. Friends at auditoryfx.com made that open, and they also made our show open. If you want to make your podcast sound bigger and more professional like us, check out auditoryfx.com. All the audio tools you need to take your show to the next level. It's the perfect gift for yourself or that podcaster in your life. auditoryfx.com, packages for as low as $19.99. Mitch, we have neglected to address beef on the last 2 shows, and so this week, this week's beef is the main entree, which feels fitting with Thanksgiving approaching, with turkey on the menu this week. And our main entree this week, our What's the Beef? What on earth is wrong with the ACC? You are in ACC country. I'm going to let you just take this one, and I will ask questions accordingly, because after what NC State did over the weekend, I don't know who you can trust up there in the triangle, let alone the sea to shining sea that is the Atlantic Coast Conference.
The ACC has been very good to me. Shout out again to the ACC folks who sent our baby some gifts, which was very nice during ACC tip-off. However, things have been bad, and I got to call it out. Do you want to start with Duke or NC State?
NC State, because that was the more shocking for me. Yeah, let's start with NC State just because I think that it's the most recent.
Okay. NC State on Sunday lost at home in Reynolds Coliseum to Rhode Island, 68-63. Let me run through some things that the reason why this is historic. It's the first time ever that Rhode Island has beaten an AP ranked opponent from a Power 4 conference. It is the first time in 10 years that NC State has lost to a mid-major opponent at home. The last time that happened was December 13th, 2015 in Westmore's 3rd season when they lost to Elon. Adding more sting to this loss, according to documents obtained by me in a public records request, NC State paid Rhode Island $25,000 to show up for this game. Plus, they covered the cost of 12 hotel rooms for Rhode Island. So Tammy Reese's team got paid. They secured a historic and upset victory, one that I think is going to pay dividends for the A-10.
Yes.
When you talk about a non-conference victory of this magnitude and how when they start playing each other in conference play, this game is going to affect the A-10's overall net, which will reinforce my theory that the A-10 is going to be a multi-bid league again this year, perhaps maybe even 3 bids.
Will Rhode Island be one of those teams, though, that's in contention for one of those bids? Did you think prior to Sunday that they would be one of those teams?
No, I did not. But now I think you kind of have to reevaluate some things and say that, yeah, maybe Rhode Island will be, up there contending with the likes of Davidson and Richmond and George Mason and some of these other teams. Rhode Island did lose to Rutgers earlier this year. So there's that. And we know how Rutgers is. They're
ain't walking through that door no more.
They're not good at basketball. Rhode Island, just to kind of a quick aside on them, they are going to have a good test this week when they play Princeton on ESPN.
We're going to get to them too. Don't you worry, folks.
Yeah, that game is Wednesday at 1 p.m. Eastern on ESPN Plus. So check that out. Good story, Rhode Island upsetting NC State. Very, very, very bad loss for the Wolfpack. I think for me, and I was talking with Corey Smith of Pack Pride earlier this week, and he
frequent listener to the pod. Shout out Corey.
Yeah, we were trying to just kind of figure out like what is the matter with NC State? What's going on here? And I was like, well, they got some mid-major opponents coming up. I think they're going to figure some things out. I think ultimately, what's going on with NC State is, let me try this analogy. I'll spin us into the MCU. So, for those who didn't watch Avengers Endgame, Iron Man dies in that movie, and Captain America gets old. And now, in the past couple of years since then, the MCU has kind of been lost in the wilderness, and it doesn't really have like a true leader. And, is it Spider-Man? Is it whoever the new Black Panther is? Is it whoever? And I think last year, NC State had Captain America and Iron Man and Isaiah James and Sinai Rivers.
Yep.
And now they have Spider-Man and Guardians of the Galaxy, which are fine, but they're probably not going to win you the ACC title, right? Just to kind of spin us into another comic book analogy here. Last year, NC State had two Batmans, Sinai Rivers and Isaiah James. And they had a very good Robin in Zoe Brooks. I don't think Zoe Brooks is becoming Batman. I don't think Camille Pierre is Batman. Camille Pierre was a really good Robin at Vanderbilt to Michaela Blake's Batman. And I think NC State right now, what we're seeing is like, they don't have a bus driver.
No.
They don't have someone game in and game out who is taking the charge and taking the lead and, doing the things that it takes to win games. I just don't think that Zam Jones is that player. I thought that Zoe Brooks could be that player. So far, I'm being proven wrong. All due respect to Zoe Brooks, like I don't know if she's equipped to do that. And it was another game where I thought Tilda Trigger did not get the amount of shots that she should have gotten. She shot 3 of 8 from the floor, but it's like, why is Zam Jones taking 18 shots? I just don't think
Zam thinks she's the bus driver.
Is that kind of player. So NC State, I believe Wes Moore said something after the game, like they're lacking some buy-in right now. I think that's accurate. They got some things that they really need to figure out. And I think that's where, this loss capped off just a really bad week for the ACC. Like, coming into this season, number 1 and number 2 in the ACC preseason poll were Duke and NC State, 2 teams that played in the ACC title last year, 2 teams that made the second weekend in the NCAA tournament last year, 2 teams that I thought were locks again to host NCAA tournament games during the opening weekend as top 16 seeds. And right now, neither one of those teams look like that. Just
hit Duke for us. I was going to say, I wonder if the same issues that plague NC State are plaguing Duke as well, from the notion of not having a bus driver. I also think that the whole Duke is the Iowa football of women's college basketball, and they don't do the offense. They just play the defense and punting, although punting doesn't exist in basketball. I think that is also a big part of Duke's early season struggles, but I also think that idea of not having the alpha is also part of it too.
Yeah, I think for Duke, I would have told you that I think they're lacking consistency and they're lacking toughness. And before this game against USF, I would have told you they've been very good on defense and they've lacked an offensive punch. However, they allowed the South Florida Bulls to score 85 points. And it's the second year in a row that they've lost at South Florida. And I'm really puzzled by this Duke thing because, as I laid out on this podcast and other places, like, this was a team coming off an Elite Eight appearance where they absolutely pushed South Carolina to the brink. They tried to drag South Carolina to the gates of hell and, got there and then the doors were locked and South Carolina pulled away, right? Duke was bringing back 4 starters, one of whom was not Toby Fournier because she didn't start it all last year. She was also coming back. Then they were adding in basically, 3 additional McDonald's All-Americans. When you talk about Riley Nelson and Ari Roberson getting healthy, Sorry, Robertson. I've been corrected by Carol Lawson in the pronunciation of her name, so apologies to her. Those two getting healthy and coming into the fold this year, and then you add Emily Skinner. Now, Emily Skinner has been in and out of the lineup. I'm not exactly sure what's going on there. Kara hasn't talked about it a ton. I don't know if it's been an injury. I don't know. I don't know what's going on there. Needless to say, though, like, were Oluchi Okanawa and Reagan Richardson that important to this team?
I literally just pulled up Oluchi's stats with Maryland and just wanted to add, like,
because when you talk about bus drivers, Oluchi has been that for Maryland.
Yeah.
And I think that she could.
Part of why she transferred away from Duke, because she wasn't going to be the bus driver at Duke.
But I think she could have been that for Duke. And now that option doesn't exist anymore. And, so far through the couple of games that I've watched Duke, Taina Mayer has been probably the player that has shown the most give a damn, I would say. The one who is actually out there, like, fighting and trying to make plays and doing stuff. I feel like Toby Fournier has kind of regressed. Like, I'm just not seeing, like, the same.
Which is a concern, because who's the coach of Duke and who's the coach of Team USA, Mitch?
Carol Lawson.
Okay.
Indeed.
Cool.
Yeah. So it's not great. So that's the start for basically the two teams that we thought were going to be the favorites in the ACC. So your two, powers or favorites coming in this season have just completely imploded and, like, don't look like contenders whatsoever. Then we get down into the rest of the ACC, and I'm just going to run through some of these pretty quickly.
Run through them.
So SMU lost to Grand Canyon by double figures and then lost to North Texas by 3 points. Pitt was beaten by a Division III team. UMBC won at Virginia. I don't know if the Cavaliers need to issue, like, a moratorium to never.
Shout out Ryan Odom. It's all power of Ryan Odom. Continue.
Again, in any sport. Boston College has lost 4 games to teams that I think we would consider to be sort of New England mid-majors: Holy Cross, Harvard, Providence, UMass. Georgia Tech lost at home to Jacksonville. James Madison beat Virginia Tech. Florida State lost to the Florida team that lost to Navy. Shout out to Navy. But still, Florida State, you shouldn't be losing to Florida.
They lost to Niall Atson, though. It changed everything, Mitch. Come on, everyone knows.
They're down bad. Florida State is not making the NCAA tournament this year. So, like, you look at all that, and then, like, you kind of just look at the bigger picture of the ACC this year, and it's kind of been like this bizarro, like, flip between the men and the women this year, where, like, the problem for the past couple of years has been, like, the men aren't winning these non-conference games, and that's hurting their net down the stretch, and they're not.
It hurts the sport as a whole, because if Duke and North Carolina are down, then the whole sport is down.
They're not getting as many teams into the NCAA tournament. The women haven't had that problem until now, though. Like, the ACC so far, 3 weeks into the season, has 2 wins over ranked opponents: NC State over Tennessee and Notre Dame's win over USC. I was trying to find, like, what was the best, the third best win by an ACC team this year. Here's what I came up with: North Carolina's win over Fairfield, Syracuse's win over Utah. By the way, shout out to Syracuse. They've been a bright spot for the ACC. They're 5-1. Miami,
their one loss to UConn, by the way. So
right.
And Miami's one loss is to Iowa.
Right, and Miami's win over Davidson. So, like, Fairfield, Utah, Davidson. Not exactly, all respect to Fairfield and Davidson, who I think are going to be really good and maybe make the NCAA tournament again this year. Those are not victories that, like, you hang banners for and hang your hat on and that you tout in your resume and stuff like that if you're an ACC team, right? And so, like, looking at sort of the bigger picture, I'm like, okay, so, like, North Carolina is probably going to be a top 16 seed. I think, like, the thing about it is like, I outlined all those losses to mid-major teams and even a Division III team for Pitt. At least you can say about North Carolina, they've taken care of business against, those mid-major teams. They beat Fairfield by double digits. They've beaten all these other mid-majors by double digits. Yes, they lost to UCLA. That's a bummer. But I think North Carolina is a good team that has things figured out. Notre Dame, maybe they can be a top 16 seed. I still just have some questions about the depth and everything around Hannah Hidalgo. And then quietly, Stanford is 7-0. And now you can say Paul, they ain't played nobody. But they are 7-0 and they've taken care of business against the teams that they've played. And I think that they might be a lot better than than previously thought. Quietly, Wake Forest is also 6-0, although I think that's a little bit of fool's gold, and I think they're still going to be pretty bad in ACC play, but we'll see. So I'm like, okay, will the ACC have one team host the NCAA tournament games in the opening weekend? Will they have two? Will they have three? I have a hard time seeing it be beyond three this year. It's just been a really bad start for that conference. And then you're looking at, like, as a whole, how many teams are they going to get into the NCAA tournament? Like we talked about last year, like they probably should have gotten in 9. Virginia Tech left on the bubble. This year, I don't know, 7. Like, it's when you have 18 teams in your league, 7's not enough. That's not good enough, in my opinion.
Well, it's not good enough when you say your premier sport in the ACC is basketball. That's when it's not good enough. When you are supposed to be the basketball conference and you are not.
And for a long time has been the women's basketball conference, has the longest running, conference tournament, had the highest attended conference tournament last year, had all those teams, make the NCAA tournament and host NCAA tournament games last year. Last year I was really busy during the opening weekend of the tournament because I had 3 schools here hosting. This year, I might not be so busy. Might just be in Chapel Hill the whole time, unless Duke and NC State really get it together. 2 opportunities coming up for the ACC. We got some FeastWeek games coming up.
Yep.
And then we got the ACC SEC Challenge. The ACC really needs to stack some good non-conference wins now through the end of December, and really help their metrics out when it gets time to Selection Sunday.
Shout out the Scranton Royals once more. Did you know that their mascot is named Iggy and looks like a wolf? I did not know that until today.
I thought they would just be the paper company.
They're the Royals. That I knew. I just didn't know that Iggy was their mascot. That is this week's What's the Beef? And hey, listen, if you have something to say about it, ACC fans, be sure to leave a comment, leave a like or 2 on this podcast on YouTube or podcast form over on the podcast network, because we know you're listening and we know you are equally as concerned about the state of the Atlantic Coast Conference. As we look ahead to the week that is known as Feast Week across the world of basketball, 2 ways that we're going to preview this week ahead. First and foremost, it's Making Money with Mitch. Let's take a look at this week's 3-pack of picks after a 3-0 start to the college basketball season. 2-1. I thought it was 1-2. Mitch says he was 2-1 last week.
No,
I misspoke. I'm
USC,
not good at math.
When I made my picks last Monday, the line was USC plus 2.5.
Oh, and Notre Dame only won by 2.
Now the line didn't move, but just for the listeners out there, when I make these picks on Monday, I use Massey ratings to look at the lines, because unlike college football, which sets its lines, like a week in advance, we don't get that in women's college basketball. So Massey ratings, I go there, I see what the line is. A lot of those lines move, some of them don't, but this is how we pick the games here.
Okay, so there it is, folks. So Mitch goes 2-1. So he is, I misspoke, he is not 4-2. He is 5-1 on the season. Continue to make money with Mitch by following these lines for this week in basketball.
By the way, I just want to say apologies to the Big East. St. John, so that was a really good win over Oklahoma State. And
that was your one loss last week.
Is going to be another, game like I talked about earlier, where Rhode Island gets that win over NC State. I think that win over Oklahoma State is going to be good for the Big East when we get into the net and all that stuff later on down the line. So good win for the Johnnies. Okay. Making money with Mitch. First pick. This is Wednesday. This kicks off the Players Era Invitational out in Las Vegas. UCLA versus Texas, 2 p.m. Eastern on True TV, also on HBO Max. The line we have right now is Texas favored by 4.5 points. I'm going to take UCLA to cover because I just think UCLA is the better team. Now, I did see today that apparently Gianna Neepkins is dealing with a little tweak or a little injury. That could be problematic, but I'm going to stick with the Bruins to cover 4.5.
I like it as well, just because As much as we believe they are the Penn State of women's college basketball, Penn State usually performs well in multi-team events and in the non-conference portion of their regular season on the gridiron, and ditto to UCLA when it comes to women's basketball. How about your second pick, Mitch? Because this is game 2 of that Players Era Invitational, and it is a spicy one.
Duke against South Carolina. This is Wednesday at 4:30 p.m. Eastern on True TV and HBO Max. South Carolina is favored by 12.5, and I'm going to take South Carolina and the points because I think that they are going to smack Duke. I think it's going to be not pretty. I think that South Carolina is going to blow them out.
What was that stat from Tania Latson over the weekend? She didn't miss a shot in the first half. She was like 6 of 6 or something.
Of both of their games last week. Didn't miss a shot in the first half. I think had 24 points in each of their wins. Okay. So she's settling in nicely. Joyce Edwards also playing really well.
Hey, listen, you put a futures bet on her last year thinking she might pull off the freshman of the year honors. And, we didn't account for Sarah Strong, but that's okay. We give it to Joyce Edwards in the SEC perhaps last year. It's all good. Okay, so those are the 2 Players Era Invitational games. And certainly in terms of top 25 showdowns, it's the biggest, even with Duke falling out of the top 25. Mm-hmm. Your third pick in this week's trio of picks and Making Money with Mitch is...
Yeah, we have Fairfield at Iowa on Sunday, 1 p.m. Eastern on the Big Ten Network. I just think this line is too big. I think Iowa's going to win, but Iowa right now is favored by 28.5 points, and Fairfield is just not that bad. Fairfield is actually quite good.
What was the line when they played North Carolina?
Oh, it was also very big.
And they covered, but North Carolina covered it, didn't they?
I can't remember. I think the line was 18 points, and I think North Carolina won by 11.
Mm-hmm.
I think I might be wrong about that, but I think I just don't see Fairfield getting blown out by 30 points. They're going to put up a good fight at Iowa on Sunday and keep this thing closer than that spread.
You don't just walk into Carver Hawkeye Arena, and I'm just kidding. I just had to throw that out there.
I don't think they're going to win, but they'll make it a competitive game.
Yeah, I would agree with that sentiment. Here are Mitch's picks this week. UCLA plus 4.5 against Texas. That game is 2:00 on Wednesday in game 1 of the Players Era Invitational. In game 2, he has South Carolina, a 12.5 point favorite over Duke. Hear him, Blue Devils. Hear him roar. Mitch says Duke's not going to get off the schneid. That's 4:30 on True TV. And then Fairfield, a 28.5 point underdog to cover at Iowa Sunday at 1 p.m. Since we mentioned the Players Era Invitational, before we look at some of the other games to watch this week, because there are so many across the board, whether they are on linear television or streaming services, I do want to get your take, Mitch, both the men's and the women's basketball multi-team events, but also the influx of those multi-team events that feature NIL compensation, like the Players Era Invitational, the Players Festival, or whatever it is on the men's side out in Las Vegas. Teams are opting for those tournaments, because their players can make money. So it's not just like you're throwing all this money at a trip to, I don't know, the Maui Invitational, and all you get is a free vacation and 3 basketball games in 3 days and wear and tear on your body later. But at the same time, like, there is part of me, and maybe it's just because I'm a college basketball purist and I miss Bill Walton immensely, that is so sad to see teams willingly, and granted, we live in a capitalist society, so I respect it, but choosing to play in these team events that maybe aren't in a traditional Thanksgiving or holiday weekend location, but in turn actually put dollars in the players' pockets if they win the tournament. So I respect it, but I just don't want Maui to die, and Maui's dying, and it's very sad.
I think Maui's going to die.
It's so sad. But Baha Mar looks okay. Like Purdue out here packing a ballroom this past weekend. The weekend
I watched that Purdue game. I think that's going to change too. I think what we're seeing. I don't know how many. If this was really forecast when the NIL era sort of started. But I think that the MTE game is changing in a dramatic way, and I think it's happening fast. I think that you are going to see more events like the Players Era sort of pop up where they are. It's kind of the flip. Okay. So pre-NIL for years and years and years, teams paid to go to these events, and they paid a lot of money to do it.
Oh, to get to Hawaii ain't cheap. Trust me. I know. I'm
well,
planning
not
on a
just
honeymoon.
that, but like sometimes there were like entrance fees
Mm-hmm.
to these tournaments and stuff. And I'm talking about like 5 figures, like, you know, for on the women's side anyways. I imagine it's probably more expensive on the men's side. But you know, like, you know, for what's the tournament in Fort Myers, or the Gulf Coast Showcase is the one I'm thinking of. That was like, you know, a couple years ago, that was like 30 grand to get into. A couple years ago when I went per team, when Iowa and Kansas State and North Carolina and Florida Gulf Coast were all there, it was expensive. And I think what you're seeing now is, you know, kind of a flip side of that, where you're having some tournaments offer money to teams and players and that sort of thing. You're going to see, especially the big time programs like, you know, this Players Area Invitational, Duke, Texas, South Carolina, UCLA. You're going to see them far more often than not opt for those NIL tournaments and those NIL opportunities rather than the prestige or whatever it is of going to play in Baja Mar or the Maui Invitational or whatever it is. You know, it's hard to get to some of those places. It's a lot easier to get to Vegas than it is Hawaii. It's probably a lot easier to get to Vegas than it is the Caribbean. You know, you don't have to deal with passports and all that good stuff, right?
True.
You know, it's in the lower 48. So yeah, I think that we're seeing the MTE game shift in a big way when it comes to some of these events. I think you're going to see more and more of these events figure out, all right, well, if we can't make money off the teams, like how else do we get them to come here? Like, do we comp their hotels and their meals and just say, hey, all you got to do
to Vegas.
All you got to do is get here and show up, right? So, you know, I mean, these tournaments that have, you know, these long histories and stuff like that, they might continue to exist. I think that they're not going to continue to pull in like the headliner top 25 teams in the country, though. Like, I think the days of like, you know, seeing a top 10 matchup in Maui, that's going away. You know, Friday night on the men's side, we saw Purdue and Texas Tech in that game. That was a top 15 matchup. I think that's going to go away eventually, unless the Maui Invitational and Baja Mar decide, hey, we're also going to pay you. We're going to give your players some NIL opportunities, or if it's in Vegas or whatever.
Right. Because that's who can pay them. But I mean, the problem with Maui is, let's be real, like the tourism industry of Hawaii runs that tournament. And in case you missed it, there were some wildfires out there in Lahaina, and they don't have a ton of money right now.
Which is also the case for a lot of those events in the Caribbean. Like, they're run by the tourism boards, or they're run by the resort hosting them, or whatever. Yeah.
Yeah, I just had to get that tangent out there, just because as we look ahead to some of these other games this week, like it does hurt me. Like, I'm very excited, regardless of where those games are being played and who's being compensated and who's not. I'm excited to have tons of basketball on my television and I guess on my laptop this week. But in the same vein, it's just the purist in me is very sad. One MTE that I will have my eye on, but maybe not because it's on FloHoops, is the Cancun Challenge. Here's a sampling of some of the teams that we've already talked about, some of them, but that will be down there in Mexico this week. South Dakota State, perennially a pretty darn good team out of the Summit League. They will play UNC in their opener. NC State and Green Bay, Richmond, who we already talked about, TCU, K-State, and Ivy League perennial power Columbia, all in the Cancun Challenge. And so that's one I know I will have my eye on. Mitch, any other MTEs or games that are coming up this week during Feast Week that you've said, ooh, okay, I'm going to maybe pop on or at least box score watch?
Yeah, the Paradise Jam, especially the Island Division, is kind of interesting. You have Vanderbilt, you have Oregon State, who's 5-1. You have BYU, who has some interesting talent on that team, and Virginia Tech. I think that's some interesting matchups there. Other than that, I think, you kind of said it, the Cancun Challenge, the whatever the tournament is with Maryland and Kentucky, is that
I think it's Baja Mar. I think that's Maryland and Kentucky is Baja Mar, which never forget.
It is the Puerto Rico shootout.
Oh, which actually, I relived this with our friend Raina Harmon, now the head coach of Florida Gulf Coast. Never forget when Iowa got stranded on their way back from the Puerto Rico shootout in Jacksonville, Florida, and I went and hung out with them in the airport in 2018. And little did we know then that Megan Gustafson would go on to be the National Player of the Year. Good times. Shout out to, but once again, that's expensive, because part of why they got stranded in Jacksonville was there was only one charter plane and it had to like go get another team, bring them back, and then go get Iowa. It was a whole to do. So I understand why we are seeing less of these international holiday weekend tournaments, but still hurts my heart nonetheless. But very excited. My heart is happy by seeing how much basketball will be played this week. It's time for last call. We're going to begin with all the WNBA headlines, of which we really didn't hit them outside of the AZ FUD futures to be the number 1 overall pick. The WNBA draft lottery occurred earlier this week, and ultimately the same 5 teams, Mitch, that had the best odds to get the number 1 through 5 picks in the WNBA draft are exactly the order that they went in. The Dallas Wings, for a second straight year, have the number 1 overall pick after they earned the right to select Paige Beckers 1 year ago. They are followed by the Minnesota Lynx, who of course have the Chicago Skies pick, with the number 2 pick in this upcoming, hopefully 2026 WNBA draft. The Seattle Storm at 3, the Mystics at 4, and the Sky at 5. I'm just very sad. Also, from a basketball purist standpoint, I wanted the little ping pong balls to maybe give us a little bit of chaos, or at the very least, the Lynx to have the number 1 overall pick, so that there could be an uproar about how much they just absolutely just robbed the Chicago Sky. But that's a story for another time. Mitch, early thoughts as far as the lottery, who could go number 1 through 5. And again, there's still a whole heck of a lot of basketball to play. Additionally, I will throw out at you, since you brought up Jose and the whole crew down there in Dallas, apparently it's a second straight year that they sent Maddie Siegrist to pick for them on their behalf. She comes home with the number 1 overall pick. Also, for the second straight WNBA draft, Kurt Miller goes down to the lottery, and he had a flight issue. So keep having flight issues and keep sending Maddie Siegrist, and you will get the number 1 overall pick. Yeah,
definitely. I think the Dallas Wings are going to take Awa Pham, number 1. She's 6'6". She's from Spain. I think one of the reasons that they hired Jose Fernandez is his familiarity with the international game. I think that she is rising up the draft boards. I think she's going to go number 1 overall. I think Lauren Betts is going to go to the Minnesota Lynx. I think if you're the Minnesota Lynx, you can't pass up on Lauren Betts, 6'7", sitting there, and the opportunity to pair her with Nafisa Collier and co in the front court. And then, maybe we see AZ FUD in a Seattle Storm uniform. Lots of things still to happen. We still got to sort out the CBA. We still got to have an expansion draft. We could have some trades and stuff like that. This top 5 could shift around a little bit. The Chicago Sky could do something crazy, as they always do. Going to be an interesting couple of months, keeping an eye on the draft order.
Since you brought up the CBA, let's get to that latest report. This is courtesy of Alexa Philippou over at ESPN, also first reported by the Associated Press. The revenue sharing component still remains in question. According to the league's latest proposal, in combination with a base salary, would allow players to earn a max salary of more than $1.1 million. That's an average of more than $460,000 and a minimum of more than $220,000 in salary. This past year, the minimum was $66,000. So minimum going up to $220, the Supermax $249, $244, up to $1.1 million. Sources told ESPN the players' union does not believe that proposal includes a system where the salary cap and players' salaries sufficiently grow with the business, a longstanding demand of the players since they opted out of the current CBA in October of last year. And so we remain largely in flux. It is November 24th. That extension on the CBA is good through November 30th. So, a little less than a week as we're recording this podcast, Mitch, until we hear what's next for the WNBA in 2026, or if a lockout is looming.
I think we're going to see another extension.
Me too.
and then
they're just going to keep kicking it all the way through the 2026 season.
Yeah, I think they're going to kick it at least through the end of December. And then I think we're going to see some people on both sides maybe get nervous when that calendar turns to 2026. And there will be some sort of compromises and some resolutions to get things done. But I think, one of the big things that the players wanted was to, raise those minimum salaries and all that good stuff, which they've done, and they've raised the maximum, salaries. So yeah, I think these are good signs for the players.
And I think that the internal alarm clock's going off even further of, yeah, we can kick the can down the road through December, but also Team USA training camp, December 12th through the 14th. So that's also inching closer and closer. A sampling of some of the names that were invited to training camp for that December weekend date: Lauren Betts, Aaliyah Boston, Cam Brink, Paige Beckers, Veronica Burton, Sonia Citron, Caitlin Clark, Ka Copper, Chelsea Gray, Brittany Griner, De'Erica Hamby, Kiki Ariaffin, Rakaya Jackson, Bree Jones, Kelsey Plum, Angel Reese, Juju Watkins, the other current college player who, of course, will be unable to participate.
She's just hanging out.
Jackie Young. Caitlin hung out too when she was in college. But I mean, I'm interested if Lauren Betts, I don't know what UCLA's schedule is. I'm interested if she's going to.
She won't miss any games.
She's going to go hang out.
Yeah, they have a break. So yeah, it'll. I applied for a credential today to get to the Team USA camp here in Durham at Duke University. Also notable, I thought, was that Kara's entire assistant coaching staff for this camp are all WNBA head coaches, all of whom are pretty good at coaching offense, which not sure Kara is.
Self-awareness. That's great. Yeah. I appreciate
Natalie
that.
Nakase, Stephanie White, and Nate Tibbetts are her assistants. Yeah, interested to see just kind of what the room looks like with Caitlin Clark, Angel Reese, and Kara Lawson all in it. All three very different personalities.
And Juju Watkins hanging out just for the
Juju Watkins just hanging out on the bench, with the Blue Devil mascot or whatever.
It's gonna be fun. It's gonna be good vibes. I can't wait for Mitch's updates from there. Just I print the shirts. Put a HBO Hard Knocks camera on it. Very excited, especially if Duke continues down the road they currently.
What do you think Angel Reese's reaction would be when Kara Lawson tells her to handle hard better?
I don't even have an answer. I need a workshop. I know it's not great podcasting or great radio. I don't even have a comeback. I just need a camera on them, just like I need a camera on the Philadelphia Eagles. Oh, wait, there is one. It's the HBO Hard Knocks camera after their loss to the Dallas Cowboys. I'm very excited. Thank you to Sal Powell for letting me know that that's the thing that happened this weekend. So I'm going to need a similar camera crew for when Kara says that to Angel, because it's coming. Caitlin will embrace it. Caitlin will start probably yelling or she'll run out of the gym and she'll start yelling, to the air, and then she'll come back in. So I'm not worried about Caitlin. Angel, that'll be fun. That'll be lots of fun. Speaking of WNBA coaches, our long national nightmare is over, Mitch. The New York Liberty have a head coach. They hired longtime Warriors assistant Chris DeMarco. Of course, all the reporting came out via Shams Charania of ESPN.
Of course it did.
Yeah, of course it did. Love that. Sabrina Ionescu has been really picking Steph Curry's brain because he's been on the same bench as Chris DeMarco for years. And obviously that's the route that Sabrina was going to take. Your impressions of the decision by the New York Liberty to pluck from the association?
I just don't really understand why WNBA teams keep hiring long time or even not long time NBA assistants who have no experience whatsoever coaching the WNBA or women's college basketball. That's not to say that Chris DeMarco won't be a good head coach. Nate Tibbetts was also in this boat and got his teams to the finals this year. I don't know. I don't know if the WNBA needs a Rooney Rule or something, but it's what are we doing here? Why did Lindsey Harding get a WNBA head coaching job? Why didn't anyone want to hire Christy Tolliver? I don't get it. I find it strange.
Yeah, don't get our friend Rebecca Kopelman, sometimes co-host of this podcast, started. I get a lot of angry texts this time of year every time a hire is made in the W, and they all look the same.
Yeah, I don't get it. I don't understand what the thing is about. Let's pluck somebody who has spent a decade in the NBA rather than someone who knows this league and women's basketball intimately. It's very strange. I'm curious to see what Chris DeMarco's salary is, if anybody uncovers that, because I think my theory is that it's cheaper to hire someone who has spent their entire career as an assistant in the NBA rather than.
Although Becky Hammon went for $1 million, but she's an outlier given the high profile nature of her assistant coaching job in San Antonio.
And Becky had experience playing in the league. I think was also like the outlier there. Also, like Becky Hammon worked under, Greg Popovich for a long time. This guy worked under Steve Kerr for a long time. Okay, whatever. I don't know. It strikes me as unremarkable.
Yeah. Well, it just looks copy and paste from a lot of the hires. Speaking of Nate Tibbetts, did you see, Mitch, that his Phoenix Mercury squad has a new updated logo?
Bad.
Yeah, I think it's bad too. Like, what are we trying to do here?
They just made it more boring.
And it made it look like Like, it's not even Pixar. Like, Pixar at least makes it feel like it's 3D.
Microsoft Paint.
Yeah, Microsoft Paint. Yeah, that's what I was going for. Sorry, Pixar.
It's not good.
It's basic. I don't get it. I don't know why. Why do we need to update it? That's my issue at hand. Last two notes from me before we get out of here. We didn't mention Princeton's impressive victory over Penn State. That, yes, Gracie Merkel, the Bellarmine transfer, did score her 1,000th career point. She had 39 points in this game. It's just been hilarious because all of the tweets between ESPN, the Big Ten, every major newspaper has been like, wow, shout out to Gracie Merkel. Like, what an impressive stat for her. And then Princeton's players and Princeton's official Twitter account are out here like quote tweeting and just being like, yeah, but did they win? Did they win?
Two things. Apparently that game was not broadcast anywhere. Like, there was no option to watch it anywhere.
Isn't Penn State the largest public university in the United States?
Well, I think it was played
in an alumni base.
I think
that's what we say.
Yeah. I don't know where exactly that game was played. But I think it was, one of these FeastWeek MTEs or whatever. Just very strange that there was no one had a camera they could have just put up at, the top of the bleachers and pan back and forth like we did when I was doing high school games for Del Mar Now.
Or when the preseason and the W wasn't being broadcast and somebody just held their phone up and live streamed on Twitter.
We could have done a Twitch thing. Yeah, whatever. Yeah. Second thing, that is Maryland transfer, Gracie Merkel.
Oh, yes. Oh, my apologies. I'm sorry. Bellarmine to Penn State to Maryland.
You spent all of, 3 weeks there.
Yeah, College Park. It's the spring break capital of the world, as John Rothstein likes to say. Everyone knows, and that's what she spent her spring break in College Park.
Good win for Princeton. I think Princeton's the best team in the Ivy this year, and they're going to make the NCAA tournament.
And I just loved the salty nature of all of the various Twitter accounts. Much needed. We already noted Tania Latz and Audi Crooks. I just once again wanted to shout out those two players. We didn't do a Her of the Week on today's episode, but if we did, I think both those players, as well as, of course, Sarah Strong, would be in the conversation. AZ Fudd too. And it's going to be an exciting race for the National Player of the Year once we head to conference play. Mitch, what are your assignments this week on this Thanksgiving week, if any? What can we expect coming from you in the universe, both online and in video and print form?
Yeah, I don't think I'm traveling at all this week because nobody's really around. They're all at MTEs and whatnot. I think the next game I'm going to is going to be LSU at Duke on December 4th, which I think is not going to be close, but we'll see. So I'll be hanging out with Kim Mulkey and Flajay Johnson at Cameron Indoor Stadium.
Hopefully Kim's not having to talk about Lane Kiffin still at that point. That's all I know.
Oh my gosh. She was so mad.
In case you missed it, folks, LSU traveled to play Tulane. And of course, you could argue that at LSU, it goes football, baseball, women's basketball, men's basketball in the pecking order of what sports matter most to them. Maybe gymnastics gets thrown in there, perhaps. But point being, Kim expected most of their media contingent to follow them to New Orleans, just a 90-minute drive away for this game against the Tulane Wave. And there was no one there. And so she straight up said, "Oh, what, you all busy tracking Lane?" She goes, "He was in
busy tracking Lane. He was in Gainesville yesterday."
God bless you, Kim. God bless you, Kim. A content machine. I'm just going to say this as we get out of here. Like, Blue Devil fans, we said a lot of bad things about Notre Dame, and Notre Dame beat USC. So maybe you do get South Carolina out in Vegas this week because we've put the announcer jinx. It's out there. I will be at JU tomorrow. They picked up another nice win over Florida International on Saturday. So I'll be on the call on ESPN Plus Tuesday, although this podcast comes out Wednesday. So you guys will have heard JU, I'm assuming, will defeat Georgia Southwestern, the D2 giant from the Peach Conference, Sun Conference. One of those, whichever one Flagler's in. I don't know. but we're going to figure it out. They have a cool mascot. I've gotten to call a lot of really cool mascots. They're the Canes, but it's like a hurricane. Really cool. I digress. And then UNF's going to be hosting their Thanksgiving tournament this weekend. And so I will also be on the call for that.
Americus, Georgia, which I did not know was the name of a town, but apparently it is. It is basically south. It's kind of between Albany, Columbus, and Macon. Okay, that's a place that exists. Cool. All right.
Thankfully, that game will be here in Jacksonville, FLA, where I am coming at you from. So I will not have to travel on the road to God's country up to Albany, Georgia, which is always a win, especially on this wonderful feast week, the week of Thanksgiving. We appreciate you guys hanging out with us for a extra long edition, a feast week jam-packed edition of the Women's Basketball Podcast. He's Mitch. I'm Mia saying we will catch you next week.
Deuces.